The taste of ashes, my name is Callista Ward, and for 12 years, I believed my sister buried my secrets alongside our parents. But secrets have a way of crawling out of graves. If you want to hear how this revenge unfolds, stay close. Otherwise, you might miss the moment everything burns. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, slipped between grocery flyers and unpaid bills as if it belonged there. I wouldn't have noticed it if the edge hadn't cut my thumb, leaving a paper-thin slash of red. The envelope was thick, expensive, the kind of heavy stock my father used for contracts he wanted people to remember. My name was written in Raina's looping script, too careful, too deliberate. Inside were two things: the deed to our family's summer home in Montauk and a newspaper clipping. The date was faded, but the headline bled through the years like a fresh wound. Local heiress disappears after yacht party, presumed dead. My stomach turned to lead, because the girl in that photo wasn't me. It was Leela. My cousin, no, my sister's real daughter. The one she hid from me when she took me in after the funeral. The one whose face I saw every time Raina tucked me into bed with a smile that never reached her eyes. I pressed my palm flat against the article, smearing ink and sweat. 12 years of whispers, of grief that didn't belong to me, of a will that left me nothing, all because Raina couldn't stomach the truth. She let me think my own parents disowned me. She let the world mourn a ghost who never existed. And now, she was selling my house. The glass of whiskey in my hand shattered against the wall before I realized I'd thrown it. Shards rained down like ice, but the burn in my chest was worse. Raina had played the perfect mourner. She'd hosted candle-lit vigils, wept on morning talk shows, founded a charity in Leela's name, and all this time her daughter was alive, tucked away somewhere with a new face and a clean slate. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number I hadn't used in a decade. "Tell me you still have the access codes for her accounts," I said when he picked up. Darius exhaled slowly. "You sure you want to do this?" I picked up a piece of glass, watching the light catch its fractured edges. "I want her to watch as I take everything she loves." The gala was Raina's favorite kind of trap. Chandeliers dripping with crystal, champagne fizzing in flutes, and a room full of people who'd sell their souls to watch her fall. I walked in wearing Leela's face. Not literally, of course, but the dress was hers, pale blue, the color she loved. The way I twisted my hair into a careless braid, the way I laughed with my fingers pressed to my lips, I'd studied the videos. I'd learned how to be her ghost. Raina's flute slipped from her fingers the moment she saw me. The crystals shattered at her feet, and for a heartbeat the room held its breath. "Callista," she choked out. I stepped closer, smiling. Not quite. And then the screens behind her flickered to life. Emails, bank transfers. A birth certificate with Leela's name crossed out and mine written over it in cramped script. The final nail. Security footage of Raina dragging a sobbing girl with my face into a private jet 2 days after the disappearance headlines ran. The room erupted. Camera flashes burst like gunfire. Raina lunged for me, but I caught her wrist, pressing my lips to her ear the way she used to when tucking me in. "You should have let me drown with them," I whispered. Then I let go, stepping back as the crowd closed around her, hungry for the spectacle she'd created. I walked out without looking back, the taste of ashes sweet on my tongue. But this wasn't the end. It was the first spark. The rain started as I reached the parking garage, fat drops pounding against the concrete like a drum roll for my exit. I didn't run. Every step was deliberate, my heels cracking against the wet pavement in time with my pulse. The metallic tang of the storm mixed with the scent of my borrowed perfume, roses and vanilla, Leela's favorite. The dress clung to my skin now, the blue fabric darkening at the hem where rainwater wicked upward. Darius was waiting in the black sedan, engine purring. He didn't speak as I slid into the passenger seat, just pushed a towel into my hands. I watched the hotel through the rain-streaked window. Flashes of light still burst through the ballroom windows like distant lightning. "It's done," I said, scrubbing the makeup from my face. The towel came away smeared with foundation and the last traces of Leela's ghost. Darius shifted in his seat. "Half of it," he corrected, his hands flexed on the steering wheel. "You really think she won't come after me? I laughed, tossing the towel onto the dashboard. Oh, she will, but not tonight. The first police cruiser screamed past us, sirens slicing through the storm. Right now, she's fighting for her life in a room full of people who just watched her charity empire crumble in high definition. He exhaled through his nose the way he always did before delivering bad news. The house closes escrow in 48 hours. You sure you don't want to? Burn it down. I smiled, tracing the scar on my palm, a childhood souvenir from Raina's prized rose bushes. Too easy. My phone buzzed. A news alert flashed across the screen. Breaking, disappeared heiress alive. Fraud investigation launched into Raina Montclair Foundation. I dropped the phone into the cup holder, satisfaction curling in my chest. Darius glanced at me, then away. Where to? Pier 17, I said. I have a package to collect. The drive took 27 minutes, just long enough for the adrenaline to cool into something heavier. The warehouse district loomed ahead, its streets empty except for the occasional flicker of a dying streetlight. The pier itself was a skeletal thing, rotting wood groaning underfoot, salt air clinging to every surface. A single bulb swung over the dock where a figure stood waiting. Nico. He hadn't changed much in 10 years. Still all sharp edges and restless energy, his leather jacket smelling of gasoline and mint gum. The duffel bag at his feet probably cost more than most people made in a year. You look like hell, he said by way of greeting. I shoved my wet hair out of my face. Treason suits me. Nico grinned, kicking the bag toward me. Inside, nestled between stacks of cash wrapped in rubber bands, was a passport. Leela's face stared back at me, but the name beneath it was mine. Callista May Montclair. Birth certificate's in the front pocket, Nico said, lighting a cigarette. The flame illuminated the hollows of his cheeks. Court records are wiped, even got you a graduation photo from her boarding school in Switzerland. He blew smoke into the damp air. You really gonna do this? I ran my thumb over the passport's gold foil stamp. 11 years ago, Raina had erased me. Tonight, I'd erased Leela. Did you find her? I asked instead of answering. Nico's smile vanished. Yeah, Costa Rica, little surf town with no extradition treaties. He hesitated. She's got a kid, Cal, a boy, maybe 4 years old. The plastic cover of the passport creased in my grip. A sister, a nephew, pieces of myself I hadn't known existed. Rain sheeted down suddenly, harder now, pelting the pier like nails. Nico ducked under the warehouse awning, but I stayed where I was. Let the storm soak through my stolen dress, my skin, my bones. Somewhere out there, Raina was scrambling. Lawyers, spin doctors, damage control. But the truth was already spreading like cancer through her perfect, polished world. Darius honked from the car. Nico ground his cigarette under his heel. You need a ride. I shook my head, tucking the passport into my bra. Synthetic curls tumbled free from my braid as I turned toward the water. Tell me one thing, I said. When she left, did she look happy? The silence stretched so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then quietly, yes, she did. I nodded, swallowing the bitter pill of that truth. My sister, the real daughter, had escaped, and I'd spent 12 years drowning in her shadow. The duffel bag weighed nothing as I walked away. Nico called after me, but the wind stole his words. It didn't matter. I knew where the next piece of revenge waited. The house. Raina's crown jewel. The one she'd stolen from my parents' will. The one she'd promised to turn into a memorial for the daughter who never died. Darius kept the car at a crawl as we passed it. A towering Victorian with a wraparound porch, its windows dark except for a single light in the attic. Mrs. Peabody. The live-in nurse Raina hired after her grief made international headlines. I memorized the driveway cracks, the loose shutter on the east wing, the broken step where Raina twisted her ankle the summer I turned 14 and she locked me in my room for 3 days. Drive, I murmured. The wheels hadn't even stopped rolling before I was out, the duffel bag slung over my shoulder. The spare key was still under the ceramic frog by the back door. Inside, the house smelled of lemon polish and Raina's jasmine perfume. I didn't turn on the lights. Upstairs, I pressed my ear to Mrs. Peabody's door. The soft rasp of snoring greeted me. 3 doors down, Raina's bedroom loomed, a museum of her grief. Framed photos of Leela. Candles burned down to stubs. The silk robe draped over her chair like a second skin. I set the duffel bag on her bed and unzipped it. By the time the sun rose, every photo would have my face. Every court record would proclaim me the rightful heir. And Raina, she'd come home to find her sanctuary desecrated. But first, I opened the nightstand drawer. The velvet box inside was smaller than I remembered. The diamond ring barely fit my finger. Mom's ring. The one Raina swore was lost in the wreckage. Darius was right. This was only half finished. A floorboard creaked behind me. Mrs. Peabody stood in the doorway, her bathrobe hanging open over polka-dot pajamas. Callista. The name sounded foreign in her mouth. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. Then her eyes dropped to the ring on my finger, and she smiled. She kept it from you. Mrs. Peabody shuffled forward, her slippers whispering against the hardwood. Typical. She reached past me, plucking a folded envelope from the nightstand. Been waiting 12 years to give you this. The paper was thin as onion skin, my father's handwriting unmistakable even after all this time. If you're reading this, Calamity, then the house is yours, the rest blurred. Mrs. Peabody squeezed my shoulder. Package came 3 days after the funeral. Raina intercepted it. My knees hit the carpet. All these years, I'd thought my parents disowned me, cut me out, abandoned me. But the will in my hand said otherwise. The envelope fluttered to the floor as I stood. Mrs. Peabody stepped back, watching with something like pride as I walked to Raina's closet. The lighter sparked on the first try. Flames danced across silk and cashmere, racing up scarves and feather boas. Heat licked at my cheeks as I backed toward the door. Mrs. Peabody didn't scream, didn't run, just smoothed her robe and said, I always liked you better anyway. We were halfway down the block when the first window exploded. Darius didn't ask, just pressed the gas as the sky turned orange behind us. I closed my eyes, the ring cutting into my palm. Round one went to me, but Raina always did fight dirtier when cornered. The fire truck screamed past us as Darius took the long way around town, the acrid scent of smoke still clinging to my hair and clothes. My knuckles ached from clutching the ring too tight. She'll know it was me, I said. The words tasted like gasoline. Darius drummed his fingers on the steering wheel. She knew the minute those papers disappeared from her room. He glanced at me, the streetlights carving shadows under his eyes. Thing is, Cal, does it matter now? The highway stretched before us, black and endless. I uncurled my fingers. Mom's diamond caught the moonlight, winking like it had secrets of its own. Raina's lies had kept me out of my house for 12 years. But this was proof. Not just that she stole my inheritance, but that my parents never wanted me gone at all. We're not running, I said. The realization settled over me, heavier than the smoke in my lungs. We're going to Alina. Darius stiffened. Your mother's sister, the one who wouldn't take you in after. The same. I tapped the envelope against my knee. Raina played the grieving widow for over a decade, but Alina, she practically invented the role. The last time I'd seen her was across a courtroom when the state was deciding where to dump the troublemaking orphan. She'd worn black lace gloves to the custody hearing. The GPS estimated we'd reach Alina's estate by dawn. I dozed off to the sound of tires on asphalt, dreaming of velvet-lined drawers and the way Raina used to hum when she thought no one was listening. The gates were rusted shut. Charming, Darius muttered, throwing the car into park. Morning light bled through the trees, turning the wrought iron bars the color of dried blood. Beyond them, Alina's mansion sagged under ivy and neglect. The kind of place where time moved slower, heavier, like honey dripping off a spoon. I stepped out, gravel crunching under my boots. The intercom crackled before I could press the buzzer. 12 years too late for a family reunion, Callista. Alina's voice rasped through the speaker. A camera lens glinted above the keypad. I held up the envelope. We need to talk about what Raina took from us. Silence, then the groan of metal as the gates shuddered open. Alina waited in the foyer, a silk shawl draped over her bony shoulders. She hadn't aged so much as withered, her sharp cheeks sinking into themselves. The house smelled of mothballs and rosewater, the air thick enough to choke on. Still dramatic as ever, she said, eyeing the soot stains on my sleeves. Her gaze snagged on the diamond ring. For the first time, something like surprise flickered across her face. Darius hovered behind me. I could feel his tension in the way his breath hitched. Alina noticed too. "Your guard dog can wait outside," she said, turning toward the dim hallway. "He stays." Alina's laugh was a dry leaf rattling in the wind. "Oh, you are your mother's child." She flicked a hand toward the parlor. "What does my dear sister-in-law have to do with you breaking into Raina's house, H. Shem?" I spread the will across her coffee table, the paper whispering against the polished wood. The ink had faded, but the words still burned. Half the estate to Callista Morgan Vaughn, the other half held in trust until majority or marriage. Alina traced a finger over our father's signature. He always did think rules didn't apply to him. She leaned back, the shawl slipping. "Raina spun quite the story about you, you know. Said you were unstable, violent, that your parents regretted certain decisions." My throat closed. I'd heard those whispers in every foster home, seen them in the way caseworkers eyed my file. Raina made sure of that. But the will was never filed, Alina finished. She plucked a photo from the mantel, Mom and Dad at their wedding, younger than I'd ever known them. Funny thing about probate court, when a wealthy family insists there's no will and the sole surviving relative agrees. She shrugged. Judges tend to look the other way. The room tilted. I gripped the armrest, nails biting into brocade. "You knew." Alina studied me over her teacup. She promised me the Degas, a confession wrapped in porcelain calm. "Your mother's favorite. She knew I'd always wanted it." Darius made a sound like a snarl. I held up a hand. "And in return, I signed an affidavit." Alina set down the cup with a clink. "Said your parents mentioned revising their will, that they worried about your proclivities." The betrayal unfolded inside me, cold and precise. My own aunt, my mother's sister. Outside, a branch scraped against the window like fingernails on glass. I leaned forward. "Tell me where she hid the rest." Alina's lips thinned. "There's no coming back from this, Callista. I know." She exhaled long and slow, then reached into her shawl pocket and slid a key across the table. The brass was tarnished, the teeth worn smooth. "Safety deposit box," Alina said. "First National downtown, in your father's name." She hesitated, then added almost gently, "Don't open it alone." Darius caught my elbow as we stood. "Why help us now?" Alina's smile was a razor cut. "Because Raina sold the Degas at Sotheby's last spring." She patted my cheek, her rings icy against my skin. "And darling, nobody steals from me twice." The door clicked shut behind us. Darius whirled on me. "She's playing you." Probably. I tightened my grip on the key, its edges biting into my palm. "But we're done playing Raina's game." The morning sun caught the diamond on my finger, Mom's ring, Dad's will, Alina's treachery, every piece slotting into place. Darius raked a hand through his hair. "So now what?" I looked past him toward the highway humming in the distance. Toward the city where Raina would be scrambling, frantic, as the smoke cleared and the truth rose from the ashes. "Now," I said, "we ruin her." The engine roared to life. Behind us, Alina's mansion watched silently as we drove away, its windows dark as closed eyes. The car ride to the city was thick with silence. Darius kept glancing at me, his fingers tapping an impatient rhythm on the steering wheel. The key felt heavy in my pocket, a silent accusation. Every mile closer to the bank was another chasm opening between who I'd thought I was and the truth that had been buried for years. First National, downtown. The building loomed ahead, an imposing structure of stone and glass, its brass doors polished to a high shine. People rushed past us in tailored suits, briefcases swinging, their lives undisturbed by the storm gathering in my chest. The security guard barely glanced at us as we stepped inside, our shoes clicking against marble floors. The safety deposit boxes were downstairs, in a vaulted room lit by warm, low lighting. The air smelled faintly of old paper and metal. A teller in a navy blazer looked up when we approached. "Can I help you?" I hesitated, then slid the key across the counter. "Box 127 under the name Vaughn." She examined the key, then glanced at me. "And you are?" "Callista Vaughn." My voice didn't waver. The account holder was my father. She pursed her lips briefly, then nodded. "I'll need to verify your identity." Darius shifted beside me, tense, but the process was smoother than I expected. A copy of Dad's death certificate, my ID, the key. Each piece of the puzzle slipped into place until the teller led us to a private alcove and slid a long metal box onto the table. "It'll take a few minutes," she said. "When you're finished, just press the buzzer." Then she left, her heels clicking softly on the tile. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Darius exhaled slowly. "You sure?" I reached for the box. Never been more sure. The lid lifted with a quiet creak. Inside, neatly stacked folders waited, edges crisp, labels typed in Dad's unmistakable handwriting. Estate documents, legal correspondence, private memos. But it was the envelope on top that froze me, yellowed with age, my name scrawled in Mom's looping script. Callista. My fingers trembled as I pulled it free. Darius drew closer, a quiet presence at my shoulder, but I barely noticed. The paper inside was thin, delicate, ink slightly blurred in places as if by moisture. "My darling girl, if you're reading this, then you found the truth. I'm so sorry." Raina was always so persuasive, so convincing when she wanted something, and I was weak. We both were. A knot formed in my throat. I swallowed hard. "When the accident happened, when we knew we weren't going to make it, your father tried to get the revised will filed. Raina intercepted it. She told us she'd take care of you, that it was better this way." She lied. I pressed my lips together, forcing myself to keep reading. "There's a file in this box labeled Vaughn Holdings. Look at it. It details every manipulation, every backroom deal Raina made with the estate's trustees. She siphoned money, Callista, millions. Enough that if the courts knew, she'd lose everything, including custody of you." A flicker of heat roared under my skin. Darius exhaled sharply. "Jesus." I set the letter aside and reached for the folder. Inside, pages of bank transfers, signed agreements, notes in Raina's tight, deliberate handwriting. All proof of embezzlement, of fraud. My pulse thundered in my ears. She hadn't just stolen my inheritance. She'd stolen me. Darius picked up one of the documents. "This is enough to bury her, legally and socially." His voice was low, dangerous. I stared at the papers, the truth assembling itself in my mind like shards of glass finally taking shape. "She doesn't deserve prison." My voice sounded distant, almost detached. "She deserves ruin." A slow, dark smile curved his lips. "You have a plan." I lifted my gaze to meet his. "I do." The drive back was less a journey than a declaration. Raina had spent years building a fortress of lies, of carefully crafted deceit, and now I was taking a sledgehammer to every last brick. The first step was simple. I made a call. An hour later, we pulled up to a sleek office building downtown. The woman waiting for us at the door was a former attorney from Vaughn Holdings, one Raina had fired 2 years ago for insubordination. Now, she was about to become my greatest weapon. "Callista." Lillian Carter's handshake was firm, her gaze sharp. "You look just like your mother." I smiled. "Let's make sure Raina remembers that." She led us into an empty conference room where a projector screen dominated one wall. "You said you had proof." I set the folder down with deliberate slowness. "Enough to destroy her." Lillian flipped through the documents, her expression hardening with each page. When she finally looked up, her grin was razor-edged. "She's finished." Darius leaned forward. "How fast can we move?" "Depends." She tapped the papers. "Do you want her in prison, or do you want something slower?" The air hummed with possibility. I met her eyes. "Weakness first, then blood." Lillian's answering smile told me everything I needed to know. Raina had no idea what was coming. The silence in Lillian's office was thick with anticipation. The projector screen loomed behind her like a blank canvas waiting for its first stroke. Across the polished mahogany table, she'd arranged the documents with military precision. Bank statements on the left, Raina's handwritten notes stacked neatly on the right. My fingers itched to flip through them again, as if somehow they'd reveal something new. "She won't see this coming," Lillian murmured, aligning a page of transaction records with the edge of the table. "Raina's weakness has always been complacency. She thinks she's untouchable." Darius crossed his arms, leaning back in his chair with a slow exhale. "So where do we start?" Lillian met my gaze, and I recognized something in the way she held herself, unyielding, methodical, like a chess player already 2 moves ahead. "First, we isolate her assets. These offshore accounts she's been funneling money into, they're only hidden if no one's looking." She tapped a line item dated just 3 months before my parents' accident. I can have my contacts freeze everything by tomorrow. Then a pause. But if we really want to bury her, we need to do it where it hurts. Which is? I asked, though I already knew. Her reputation. Lillian's smile was sharp. The truth might put her in prison, but scandal will make sure she never comes back. I thought of Raina standing in the foyer of the Vaughn estate the night before, the gleam of her diamond earrings catching the light, her laughter like silk over glass. All those carefully orchestrated charity galas. The whispered influence she wielded at the country club. Every carefully placed word in the society columns. It wasn't just money she'd stolen. It was my mother's legacy. I want it all, I said quietly. Every deal she brokered. Every lie she fed the trustees. Every whisper she spread about me after she took over. I want it laid bare. Lillian nodded, then turned to the projector, switching it on. A moment later, Raina's own handwriting flickered onto the screen, notes from a meeting with the estate executors that I wasn't supposed to see. Callista is unstable. Grieving. Legal guardianship is the only option. A thin, cold wire tightened around my ribs. Darius swore under his breath. She was setting you up from the beginning. I exhaled, slow and steady. The anger was there, yes, a banked fire behind my ribs, but beneath it something colder, more calculating. Then we return the favor, I said. Lillian's fingers flew across her laptop, pulling up another document. Internal memos from Vaughn Holdings, all stamped confidential. She told the board you weren't fit to inherit, that your parents had doubts. I almost laughed. The screenshot was dated just 2 days after the funeral. She didn't waste time, I muttered. Darius shook his head, eyes dark. She was making sure no one questioned her when she stepped in. Exactly. Lillian's expression was grim, but she got sloppy. These emails, printouts from her personal assistant's deleted files, she thought she'd covered her tracks. A slow, dangerous certainty settled in my chest. So we leak them. Lillian didn't blink. Not just leak, amplify. The society pages love a scandal, and what's more delicious than the new head of the Vaughn empire getting caught stealing from her own family? I studied the screen, tracing the lines of Raina's betrayal with my eyes. This was more than revenge. This was reclamation. What's next? My voice was steady now, smooth as poured ink. Lillian's grin curled at the edges. An invitation. The Vaughn Charity Gala was held every year on the last Saturday in September. A glittering spectacle of black-tie smugness, where Raina loved to play the generous matriarch. In 3 weeks' time, she'd be standing in the grand ballroom of the Wellington Hotel, accepting faux modest applause for her latest donation to the arts. And I was going to ruin her in front of every single guest. Darius paced Lillian's office, restless energy rolling off him in waves. You sure you want to wait that long? I didn't look up from the seating chart. She needs to be there, needs to feel safe. Lillian nodded, scrolling through her email. I already have someone inside the hotel who can get us access to the AV system. Once the keynote starts, we can override the projector. A flicker of satisfaction curled in my gut. So when Raina takes the stage, her greatest hits play for everyone to see, Lillian finished. Darius exhaled, rubbing a hand over his jaw. You realize she'll lose everything after this. Good. Silence stretched between us. Then Lillian leaned forward, threading her fingers together. There's one more thing. She pulled a single sheet from the bottom of the stack, a notarized letter with my father's signature at the bottom. My pulse stuttered. It's the affidavit he filed the morning of the accident, she said quietly. The one Raina intercepted. I took it with unsteady hands, the paper whispering as I unfolded it. I, Elliot Vaughn, being of sound mind, hereby revoke all prior designations of guardianship for my daughter, Callista Vaughn, in the event of my death. My sister, Raina Vaughn Morrison, is to have no legal authority over Callista's inheritance or person. All assets and custodial rights are to be held in trust until Callista's 25th birthday. A dull roar filled my ears. She'd known. She'd known my father had changed his mind, and she'd lied to the courts anyway. I set the paper down with deliberate precision, my vision sharpening to a knife's edge. 3 weeks. My voice was barely above a whisper. That's how long she has left. Darius watched me, something uneasy shifting in his gaze. You're sure about this? I met his eyes without flinching. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. The days that followed were a blur of strategy. Lillian coordinated with her contacts, freezing Raina's offshore accounts one by one, while Darius worked his own network, gathering whispers from Vaughn Holdings' disgruntled former employees. By the time the gala arrived, we were ready. The Wellington Hotel gleamed under the glow of crystal chandeliers, its marble floors polished to a mirror shine. The scent of expensive perfume and champagne clung to the air as guests milled about in tailored gowns and tuxedos, their laughter a low, buzzing drone. Right on schedule, Raina stepped onto the dais, resplendent in ivory silk, the Vaughn family pearls gleaming at her throat. "Thank you all for coming," she began, voice warm with practiced sincerity. I stood at the back of the ballroom, hidden in the shadows. Lillian's voice crackled in my earpiece. "Ready?" A slow smile curved my lips. "Play it." The projector above the stage flickered to life, but instead of the evening's charitable program, the screen filled with scanned copies of Raina's handwritten notes. "Callista is unstable, grieving. Legal guardianship is the only option," gasps rippled through the crowd. Raina froze, her smile turning brittle. Then came the bank records. Transfer, $2, 3M Act, 4,819 murmurs swelled. Somewhere in the crowd, a glass shattered. "What is this?" Raina hissed, turning toward the sound booth. But the crowning jewel was yet to come. My father's affidavit flashed onto the screen, his signature bold beneath the words. Raina von Morrison is to have no legal authority over Callista's inheritance or person. Silence, absolute, deafening, descended on the ballroom. Then the whispers began. Raina reeled back as if struck, her face draining of color. She spun toward the exit, only to stop dead at the sight of two uniformed officers waiting at the doors. Lillian's voice was triumphant in my ear. "I tipped off the DA this morning." I didn't move, didn't speak. I just watched as the empire she'd built crumbled around her. Weakness first, then blood, and hers was just beginning to spill. Raina stood frozen in the spotlight of her own ruin, pearls catching the chandelier's glow like scattered teeth. The room around her was a blur of shocked faces, champagne flutes lowering, silk gloves covering parted lips. A murmur surged through the crowd, swelling like a wave, and I let it wash over me from my perch in the shadows. The taste of victory was bitter, metallic, not sweet the way I'd imagined. Darius materialized at my elbow, his breath warm against my ear. "You okay?" I nodded, watching as Raina's trembling hands flattened against the podium. Her gaze darted frantically between the screen and the officers blocking the exit. "This is a misunderstanding." Her voice cracked like ice underfoot. The projector flickered again, this time displaying a spreadsheet, transfers from my trust fund into an account under her third husband's name. Dates, amounts, the paper trail laid bare. Someone behind me gasped. "She's been stealing from her own niece." The officers stepped forward. One pulled handcuffs from his belt. Raina recoiled, her heel catching on the hem of her gown. "No, wait," Lillian's silk-smooth voice purred in my earpiece. "Check your phone." I glanced down. A new message blinked on the screen, van at service entrance. 10 seconds, the crowd erupted. Raina's husband, Gregory, lunged toward the stage, knocking over a waiter. The resulting crash of crystal and shrimp towers sent guests scrambling. In the chaos, Raina bolted, not toward the exit, but a side door marked staff only. Darius grabbed my wrist. "She's running." I yanked free. "Let her." Because I knew where she'd go. And I'd prepared for that, too. The service hallway was dim, lined with carts of wilted roses and half-empty wine bottles. Raina's footsteps echoed ahead, sharp and panicked. I followed at a stroll, letting her think she had a chance. The emergency exit door slammed open, night air rushing in, thick with the scent of wet pavement. Outside, the alley was slick with rain. Raina spun in a circle, silk dress clinging to her knees, breath coming in ragged bursts. Then she saw it, the black van idling at the curb, its door yawning open. Relief flickered across her face. She didn't notice the figure stepping from the shadows until it was too late. Her mother. Aunt Lydia Vaughn stood like a specter in her mink stole, her cane planted firmly between Raina and the van. Even from 10 feet away, I saw Raina's lips form the word mom. Lydia's voice carried on the damp air. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? Raina stumbled back. I can explain. You stole from my grandchild, Lydia said, each word a nail in a coffin. You lied to me. You lied to him, my own son, on his deathbed. The cane cracked against the pavement. Get in the car. Raina's face crumpled. Mother, please, now. I didn't stay to watch her climb into the town car, shoulders hunched like a scolded child. Darius found me leaning against the alley wall, my throat tight. He didn't speak. Just handed me a flask. The whiskey burned like righteousness. You knew Lydia would come, he said. I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand. Of course. Because here's the thing about vengeance, it shouldn't be anonymous. It should look like justice. And for Raina, justice meant losing everything under the gaze of the one person whose approval she'd spent her life chasing. Lillian's voice crackled again, smug. Girl, you are cold. I pushed off the wall and clicked off my earpiece. The gala was still in chaos when we re-entered. Guests clustered in scandalized huddles, event staff murmuring over spilled champagne. I crossed the ballroom floor, past the podium where Raina had stood minutes ago, and climbed the steps myself. Darius shot me a questioning look. I ignored him. A hush fell as the crowd turned. Forgive the interruption, I said, picking up Raina's abandoned microphone. But I believe this event was meant to raise funds for children's hospitals. I reached into my pocket and unfolded a check, one I'd signed earlier with 6 zeros. Consider this a donation from the Vaughn Family Trust, my trust. The applause was deafening. Later in the town car, Darius exhaled hard. So what now? I watched the city lights blur past. Now, I said softly, we wait. Because revenge wasn't just about the strike. It was about the silence afterward, when the echo of what you'd done settled like dust. And Raina, she'd spend the rest of her life hearing it. The quiet after the storm was always the hardest part. In the days that followed the gala, I let the city hum outside my penthouse windows. Car horns, distant sirens, the occasional burst of laughter from the street below. The noises of lives moving on. But inside, the air was thick with waiting. Darius sat across from me at the breakfast bar, nudging a steaming cup of coffee in my direction. You haven't slept, he observed. His voice was carefully neutral, the way it always was when he thought I was spiraling. I wrapped my fingers around the mug. Neither have you. Different reasons, he muttered, rubbing the dark stubble along his jaw. Then, after a beat, Lydia called this morning. The coffee burned my tongue. I didn't react. She wants to meet. A pause, a calculated sip. Today, in an hour, the usual place. I set the cup down with deliberate slowness. Lydia's usual place was the Rowan, a members-only club so exclusive even the air smelled like old money and whispered secrets. She'd taken me there for high tea when I was 16, back when I still believed her stern smiles were a form of love. Darius studied me. You knew she'd reach out. I know how she operates. Aunt Lydia didn't just react. She assessed. She calculated. And then, when the moment was perfectly aligned to her advantage, she struck. Her call today wasn't about Raina. It was about me, about what I'd done. About what she thought I knew. Darius exhaled through his nose. So what's the play? I pushed my chair back. We give Aunt Lydia exactly what she wants. And what she wanted, more than anything, was control. The Rowan's oak-paneled walls absorbed sound like a sponge, leaving only the quiet rustle of linen and the occasional clink of fine china. Lydia sat by the fireplace, her posture as rigid as the cane propped beside her. She didn't look up as I approached, her attention fixed on the delicate task of stirring honey into her tea. Camille, she said, just my name, devoid of warmth. I lowered myself into the chair opposite her. Aunt Lydia. A flicker of her gaze over my shoulder, checking if I'd come alone. Darius lingered near the entrance, a silent shadow in a tailored suit. Satisfied, Lydia lifted her teacup. I assume you know why I asked you here. I mirrored her, wrapping my fingers around my own cup. I could guess. Then let's not waste time. She set the cup down with surgical precision. Did you sabotage Raina's gala? Sabotage. I feigned offense, pressing a hand to my chest. I donated $5 million to her charity. Lydia's lips thinned. Don't play naive, you humiliated her. And she stole from a dying man. My voice sharpened, just enough to make the couple at the next table glance over before quickly pretending they hadn't. For the first time, Lydia faltered, a microscopic crack in the armor. She told you. No, the word came out bitter. You did that night in the alley. Her fingers twitched toward her cane. Then you understand why I handled it privately. Privately. I nearly laughed. Is that what we're calling it now, letting her walk away with everything? Lydia leaned forward, her voice dropping to a hiss. She's still my daughter. And the money she siphoned from my father's medical fund, the promises she made while he was too weak to fight back. I matched her intensity, my own voice ice cold now. That trust was meant for me, for his child. A shadow passed over her face. You think I don't know that? Lydia never showed weakness. Never. But in this moment, for the first time in my life, I saw something flicker behind her eyes that resembled pain. I eased back in my chair. Then why didn't you stop her? She hesitated, a rarity. Then quieter, because I thought you would. The air between us stilled. Here at last was the truth. Lydia Vaughn hadn't stepped in because she'd expected me to. The ultimate test, would I protect what was mine, or would I let myself be trampled again? I inhaled slowly, deliberately. You used me. She didn't deny it, and yet you still won. Silence. For 20 years, I'd fought for Lydia's approval, her recognition, her love. And she'd waited, watching, calculating if I was strong enough to deserve it. The realization settled in my gut like lead. Across from me, Lydia reached into her purse and slid an envelope across the table. Read it. Inside, there was a single sheet of paper. The Vaughn family trust, amended, signed, notarized. Every asset, every holding, every penny now under my name. Lydia watched me, unblinking. I gave you the pieces, she said. Now let's see what you build. And as she rose, cane clicking against the hardwood, I finally understood. Revenge wasn't about the strike or the silence. It was about proving you were the storm itself. The weight of the envelope in my hands felt heavier than paper and ink had any right to be. I waited until Lydia's cane had faded from earshot, until the clatter of the restaurant had swallowed her, before I let myself breathe again. My fingers tightened around the envelope, all of it. Every last penny, every building, every shred of power the Vaughn name had ever touched, mine. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like a hammer being handed to me with the words, "Do what you should have done years ago," etched into the handle. Darius stepped forward, silent as ever, but his presence was enough to ground me. "Drivers outside," he murmured, just loud enough for me to hear. I tucked the envelope into my coat and stood, smoothing the fabric like I was brushing off the last traces of the conversation. The cool night air hit my face as we stepped out, sharp against my skin. Raina, of course, had known what she was doing when she stole from my father. She'd waited until he was too weak to fight, until the meds had clouded his mind enough that she could slip the papers under his hand and guide his signature. And Lydia had let her. Not out of ignorance, not out of blindness, but because she wanted to see if I'd burn it all down to get it back. The car door shut behind me, sealing me into the quiet hum of the engine. Darius didn't ask where to. He already knew. 15 minutes later, the tires rolled to a stop in front of the Vaughn estate. Massive, looming, the kind of house that whispered old money and older sins. The lights in the east wing were on, Raina's wing. "I need you to do something for me," I said at last, not looking at him. Darius had been with me long enough to read silence better than words. Already on it. I exhaled, slow and controlled. "You don't even know what I'm going to ask." His voice was steady. "You want me to make sure she's home." A pause, then, quiet enough it was almost swallowed by the leather seats. "I want you to make sure no one stops me from walking through that door." I didn't have to say more. He nodded once and stepped out, pulling out his phone as he moved toward the gate. I watched the house. Raina had taken more than money from my father. She'd taken the last years he had left, the false promises of better treatments, of experimental drugs she'd never actually paid for, all while bleeding the estate dry. And she'd done it with a smile, my fingers flexed. Lydia had given me the ultimate weapon, control, but revenge wasn't about power, it was about pain, and Raina had never been afraid of money. She was afraid of being forgotten. By the time Darius returned, the plan had already taken shape in my mind. "She's alone," he said, sliding back into the driver's seat. "House staff's dismissed for the night, just her." Perfect. I didn't knock. The key turned in the lock, smooth and soundless, as if the house itself was waiting for me. The halls were too quiet, the kind of quiet that settled when someone knew they wouldn't be disturbed. I found Raina in the library, curled in an armchair by the fire, a glass of bourbon dangling from her fingers. She didn't look up when I entered. "Come to gloat." Her voice was light, amused, like she'd been expecting this. I shrugged off my coat and folded it over the back of the sofa, taking my time. Gloating would require me to care what you think. She finally turned, her smile sharp. "But here you are, in my house." "I think you'll find," I said, reaching into the inner pocket of my jacket, "that it's not yours anymore." I let the documents fall onto the table between us. Raina's gaze dropped, her amusement flickering just long enough for me to see it. Then nothing. Her fingers tightened around the glass. She wouldn't. Oh, she did. I sank into the chair opposite her, watching the firelight dance across her face. "Every share, every deed, even the wine cellar you love so much." Raina's jaw ticked. "You bribed her." "Funny." I tilted my head. "That's what I thought about you." For the first time, her mask slipped, real anger, real panic flooding in. "You have no idea what you're playing with." "I don't." I leaned forward just slightly, enough so my next words carved into her like a knife. "I think I do. Because while you were stealing from a sick man, I was learning every loophole, every contract, every single way this family's fortune could be ripped apart. And now..." I gestured to the papers. "I don't have to, it's already mine." Raina's breath hitched. She was smart enough to know what that meant. The Vaughn name wasn't just money, it was reputation, connections. The kind of influence that could erase a person if wielded right. And I intended to erase her, not from the accounts, not from the documents, from memory. I stood, leaving the trust papers on the table like the slaughter they were. "You have until morning to gather whatever personal belongings you want to keep," I said, walking toward the door. "After that, I'm having your name removed from every guest list, every donor registry, every charity board you've ever schmoozed. You want to be part of this family. Fine. But you won't be recognized by it." She surged to her feet, glass crashing to the floor. "You can't do that." I turned back just once. "Watch me." The door clicked shut behind me, cutting off whatever she screamed next. Outside, the wind had picked up, cold enough to bite. Darius waited by the car, silent. He didn't ask how it went. He already knew. I slid into the back seat, the weight of the night settling into my bones. Lydia had set the board. I'd just taken the first move. And Raina, she hadn't even seen the second one coming yet.